So this is our second panel. We have two panels today. The first panel is on, which is being curated by Makam, and Shilpa will take us through the panel. Over to you, Shilpa.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Shilpa, representing Makam here. Makam is Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch. It's a women farmers forum. We all know that women are counted as workers in our Indian economy, but they depend, we have statistics, 80% of the economically active women are engaged in agriculture. And agriculture has many more number of labor days of women than men, and there are many studies for that. But women are not recognized as farmers in their own rights. So Makam is a national platform of individuals, organizations, activists, researchers, civil society organizations, and women farmers collectives, which works to ensure recognition of women as farmer in its own rights, and to secure their resource rights and entitlements, also secure their equal decision-making spaces in agriculture and allied sectors. So we work across 24 states in the country, and we take up studies, run campaigns at the grassroots, take up advocacy, and we have different themes. So we work on forest rights, land rights, FPOs, farm suicide families, and of course agroecology. So that's why the panel is put here, and I'm very happy to have the esteemed panel. And before I introduce the panel, just to set the context, because we firmly believe that agroecology has immense potential to transform the social, economic, and ecological dimensions in the context of agriculture. The transformative approach holds the potential to challenge the power dynamics in the present food regime and the industrial forms of agriculture. However, the current programs on agroecology holds little less regard for the transformative approach that emphasizes the interconnectedness of the social and the ecological dimensions, and even lesser to the gender dimensions within social. So even if gender issues are addressed, it's as if like women are added on, or men are replaced by women, or that the gender perspective is missing, the gender analysis behind that to identify the gender constraints, to look at it from a gender perspective, that is missing. And that may in fact lead to a negative impact on women, or women may be left behind, because their different interests, needs, roles, access and control over resources, these are not taken care of. So that could lead to a negative impact as well. So if we don't analyze the power equations within the larger agroecology paradigm, it could have a sort of detrimental impact, but also will defeat the huge potential that agroecology has to change the power equations. So if you look at the continuum framework of reach, benefit, empower, and transform, agroecology certainly benefits women. We all know, we are aware of that. It is safer for their health, reproductive health, it is sustainable, it leads to food and nutrition sustainability, it has a positive impact on climate change, which of course impacts women negatively the most. It also reduces economic costs and risk of agriculture, leading to less economic distress, farm suicides, and hence less social distress, impacting again the women, because ultimately it's the single women who are left behind, who have to manage the household and agriculture both on their own. So there are several benefits of agroecology. But we also believe that agroecology has huge transformative potential on the gender-based power relations. The transition pathways depend on women's existing knowledge and skill sets, and holds opportunities for making practicing women farmers as master trainers, FPO leaders, champion farmers, community resource persons, etc. Also, agroecology-based farming is based on local resources, and it enhances the agency of women farmers to put their local knowledge into practice, because you can bypass, you can access, you don't have to go to the market, and you don't need money, and hence you don't need men for that to go via men. So the power equations again change there. However, a change in mindset of larger community of women farmers as knowledge producers and knowledge holders is very important for this transformation of social norms. Otherwise, we may again end up having increasing the workload of women. Agroecology also ensures crop diversification. We are talking about biodiversity, co-creation of knowledge. So it ensures crop diversification, which brings in many more commodities in the ecosystem that can be consumed locally. And that knowledge again of crops, but also recipes, and Rascom is a live example here, are known to rural women. And last but not the least, we have the large-scale rural, the women's collectivization underway. And that gives us an opportunity of trying out group farming at the production system level, of financing transitions, for creating alternative market space by women farmers, collectives, women farmers, enterprises both at the input level and at the output level, inputs for bioinputs, seeds, nursery, etc., and at the output for processing, value addition, etc. And with this knowledge and leadership of women farmers, even agroecology programs will benefit. They will get strengthened, they will get more effective. So it's a win-win for both if we have a gender transformational approach. So with this context, I've requested the panel to look at 3 or 4 questions largely. So one, if we can discuss on the gender markers that need to be incorporated for any research projects on agroecology, which may be different than the conventional agriculture approach, or it could be the same. Second, what kind of monitoring and impact evaluation frameworks would be needed to accompany agroecological transitions that would empower women to participate and take a lead. Third is, what kind of transformations or mindset principles are needed to make the transition sustainable, and how can research and civic action emphasize the same? And the fourth is, what kind of civic action will assist in terms of extension frameworks, so that we integrate women's knowledge and skill sets in documentation, communication, which creates equal decision-making spaces and participation of women at all levels. So with this, I would request, I will introduce each panelist in their, one by one, I mean, when they are sharing their thoughts. So I would request Dr. Sumi Krishna to start with. Dr. Sumi Krishna is an independent scholar and widely published author, and has 5 decades of experience on gender, environment development, and natural resource-based livelihoods at the policy, program, and field levels. She is a former president of the Indian Association for Women's Studies 2005 to 2008, and has been associated with various universities and institutions, has advised on integrating science and social science curricula, methodologies, and practice, and helped to frame workshops and courses on gender and biodiversity, agriculture, rural development, etc. Presently, she heads the governing board of Antra, Pune-based organization which works with pastoralists and shepherds, particularly women, on sustainable livestock health and management, something which we have not talked about yesterday much. For nearly 15 years, she has been series editor for the Routledge on Northeastern India, and has recently, in 2023, edited 2 volumes of readings on the region. So over to you, Sumi, for sharing your thoughts.
I'm very happy to be here, and also a bit sad in a way that although we are among so many like-minded people, this struggle has taken so very long, and who knows how much longer it's going to take. As a young researcher in 1975, which was the first international year for women, the ICAR, Indian Council for Agricultural Research Journal, brought out a special issue on Indian farming, which actually covered all sectors. And I did a small study there on one village in Haryana and the changes wrought by the Green Revolution. And already one could see, even to a young person like me with no training and no guidance, as Shilpa had said, that women were being left and so on. And we talk of feminization of agriculture. She mentioned the number of women in farming. Actually, as some researchers have pointed out, it should be the feminization of agrarian distress that we are talking about. So I think there are many challenges here, and I want to take this to a broader level. I'm going to deal with 4 challenges quickly. The first is to establish certain normative principles. That is, recognize women as farmers and farm workers, not instrumentally within a particular policy. Recently, there have been a lot of media reports, for instance, on women's new roles in natural farming. Now, what is this new role? You know, this is the whole thing. The trust is very instrumental. Secondly, we need to acknowledge that farming knowledge is rooted in women's customary division, in the customary division of gender roles and the work that women do. It is not something that is essentially within all women, as something that they are born with. So even as we talk of knowledge from the ground and women's knowledge, we should be careful not to romanticize this. It is not all women's knowledge. And most importantly, I think, especially for this group, is that when we laud a particular conservation landscape for its agroecological and sustainable values, then we should also look at it from the taskscape and what I've called the genderscape that it has underlying it. For instance, in the Apatani Valley in Arunachal, which is this high altitude, 1500 meters to 2000 meters rice and fish farming with a very ingenious method of natural irrigation. It has been written about, it has been, filmed, and it is this great ideal example of conservation landscape. But it rests on exploitation of women and exploitation of women's labor. So you have to hold both these things together, and that this sustainability actually, as I've said elsewhere, something that there is a gendered price of rice from these landscapes. The second, which Shilpa also touched upon in her introduction, is to evaluate the plethora of the women-specific interventions that we now have. The term gender is used, but it's often only a synonym. The progressive vocabulary actually masks discrimination. And when we are talking about gender, we are not addressing men at all. We are only addressing women. So this doesn't make any sense. A lot of the livelihood trainings, they are geared to women and to skilling women. Men also need skills in other things, but no trainings are designed for that. If women are to be freed, if their time is to be freed, then there are certain tasks that men have to take on. But where is the training, or where is the approach that deals with that? And various things like, there are tools. Feminist economists have used gender budgeting tools. But when you look at how the tools are used, they are just aggregation of various welfare schemes. A housing scheme could be called, part of the gender budget. Housing, of course, it helps women, but it also helps the whole family. So there are a lot of devious ways in which things are put into the gender budget. Thirdly, I think it's important to, while we are doing all these work on the ground, it's also important in agroecology, it's also important to examine the impact of wider policies on women. And this, I think, we are not doing sufficiently. We're doing in some fields, like in forests. Currently, there are, there are so many changes in the forest laws, diversion of forest land for other purposes. So what impact does it have on women who were going to these forests and who were for various livelihood and domestic needs? in Nagaland, there is an agreement between the government and Patanjali and I think Godrej Agrovet to transfer huge swathes of land for oil palm plantations. What impact is this going to have, not only on the ecology, but also socially and on women? One thing that I won't talk about everything here, but one thing that I would want to talk about is livestock, which I have been through all the abstracts, 100 plus abstracts, and there is almost nothing on livestock. This is the missing link. How can you talk about agroecology without talking about livestock and pastoralism? Livestock links farming and forest. And you're sitting in Anand, and what is happening in the livestock sphere, the huge thrust to hybridization. The only indigenous breed that is being projected at all is the Gir cow, nothing else. And there are, say with Himachali or Uttarakhand cows, when the Gir is bred, it does increase milk production, but those are small statured, hairy animals. It also changes their physiology. It also brings on health problems. And then there is this new scheme of sex-sorted semen, which is going throughout the country at a very fast rate to produce only female offspring. So this is geared to farmers who have more than 5 cows. There are many implications in terms of feeding, in terms of fodder, in terms of women's work, but nobody is talking about this. So we had so much talk about the hybrid varieties and what it did in the Green Revolution, but we are seeing this happening right here today and nobody is talking about it. The last challenge is that I think we need to break this hierarchy of knowledge systems. When today, it's true that at one point 50 years ago when we began documentation, we as researchers were going to the field and documenting. But that time is past. I think we have to enable farming women to voice their own concerns, to record transition themselves using their own tools, which may be through whatever tools that they culturally have, or through emerging tools such as the mobile phone. We have a small project in Andhra where girls are recording the lives of their mothers, shepherding women, on the mobile phone, and this has given a beautiful audio visual. It's very simple documentation, and it gives you a picture of what is happening. So we have to look at new tools, and we have to enable the women to use these tools themselves instead of us always going there to document. A lot of the papers in this conference deal with what I have elsewhere called side stream interventions, that is non-mainstream interventions and NGO facilitated interventions. That is a very good thing, but we need to document this over the long term, not at moments of just at a particular moment, but over the long term. One last point about the methodology. I think the gender analysis methodologies which exist in the literature are really do not work in our very complex and diverse settings. So we need context-specific approaches, and there are many examples of our researchers and practitioners doing this. Finally, moving forward on gender equity, and I prefer to use the term equity to equality, which was the title of this, we can talk about it later, is that, and I think some of these points I also heard implicitly in the pre-conference webinars. One is that doing gender in the field cannot be separated from internalizing gender by individuals and within organizations and institutions. Equity cannot be ensured unless the focus shifts, which this conference, there is evidence of it, from gender to the intersection of discriminations of gender with tribe, caste. Caste is a very difficult thing to talk about. Today we can talk about gender, but we have to use gender as the entry point. Stream, these what I call the side stream agroecological interventions also need to integrate sectors. This is not an easy thing to do, to talk about farming and forests and livestock altogether. But in a woman's life in the field, all these things are integrated, and water especially. So we have to look at how we have to find ways of doing, how methodologies of doing, not just talking about, this conference is an example that there is a lot about farming, but there's very little about livestock, because we still are trying to find ways of integrating that. And finally, as we are seeking to do in Makam, action researchers need to link with civic action groups to input into programs and policies, seeking not only amelioration, but transformation. Yeah, I have 2 more slides just of notes and references. If anybody is interested, we can talk about it later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sumi, for raising such pertinent questions. We'll Siva now. Siva Kulkarni. Siva has over 3 decades of experience of working on gender and natural resources. She's one of the founding members of SOPECOM, Society for Promoting Participative Ecosystem Management, based out of Pune. She's a senior fellow there and coordinating gender and rural livelihoods programs within the organization, and looking at programs around decentralization, gender and land, water and sanitation. She's published several articles and book chapters around issues of gender, water, sanitation, rural livelihoods issues. She's been associated with the feminist movement in India very closely. She's a member of the National Facilitation Team of Makam, founder of Makam Maharashtra chapter, and she's also a core member of the Feminist Policy Collective. She has made consistent efforts towards bringing in a feminist analysis lens in research and actions in the areas of water, land, and agriculture. Over to you, Seema.
Out the entire expanse of what would have been said in different ways, going from the more general to the specifics that probably the 3 of us would be discussing. Shilpa has already laid out the approach as to why Makam and how Makam really approaches agroecology. So I think just to add a little bit to what Shilpa mentions, is also how we conceptualize agroecology. So it's really beyond farms. And as she said, it's about the power dynamics, it's about governance, it's about who decides and whose knowledge. So those really are issues that are central and that drive Makam's interest in agroecology. So it's beyond farm, institutions, policies, and social structures. It's also about centering the actor. So I think a lot of focus in agroecology, as in most of the sectors, would be around, in this case, the individual farm and the livestock, forest, but really the actors in terms of marginalized peoples, women, grassroots collectives, coalitions, are not very central to many of these discussions. And for Makam, this becomes extremely important. So as many in this room would, of course, agree with, that for Makam as well, agroecology is not just a set of alternate farm practices, but they do hold a very strong potential for transformation. So shift in power in terms of who decides, how our agenda is set, and finally how is governance actually happening. So it's about challenging power and governance. So very quickly, this is Makam's presence, active presence. Of course, Makam is working across 24 states, but very active 8 to 10 states where agroecology programs are taken up at different levels, at a different pace. In some places where Kraskum, you're already eating food here, so there farmer producer groups. There are different ways in which Makam's work around agroecology and farming is really reaching out. This is actually just to bring out the paradox which Shilpa anyway has said in terms of high engagement in agriculture, but really low access to resources and a very sharp increase in unpaid, underpaid work among women farmers. And I think all official data is clearly highlighting towards that. So what we have from the agriculture census clearly shows that women's access to operational holdings is extremely low, but women are driven into unpaid or underpaid work, pushed into self-employment rather than paid employment in agriculture. So this also builds the rationale for why we really want to be there, and is a very compelling reason for Makam to talk about rights, recognition and entitlements for women farmers. But on the other hand, it also talks about how the agrarian distress is a gendered, it's a gendered crisis, it's a gendered issue, where low investments in agriculture, commons, is also leading to increased labor and unpaid labor for women, which has multiple implications. So, I mean, as I said, countrywide various initiatives, but I will just very specifically talk about the agroecology program in Maharashtra, just so that it is able to unfold some of the key issues or learnings for us in terms of what could be the civic engagement, what should really be new research areas, or probably many of you in the room are already looking at them, but could there be any additions to that? So really focusing on these two groups, and one specifically highlighting these two groups is because in a way the sort of the deepest crisis or the manifestations come by way of farmer suicides and distress migration. And these are the two sets of categories of women farmers that we have very solidly been bringing together in the state of Maharashtra. So women who are left behind after the farmer suicides, and largely whatever gets recorded are male suicides. As we've always argued in Makam that women are invisible in life and death. We really don't know how many women farmers are committing suicide because simply there is no data disaggregation of rural and urban. But there are larger numbers of women and housewives numbers of suicides are very high. So these two categories really are our focus. One that is engaged in distress migration in the state of Maharashtra, where the entire political economy is around sugarcane. So you already see how distress migration, due to pushing of certain kinds of crops, whether it's cotton in the Vidarbha region or sugarcane, growing of sugarcane and the distress that is associated with it. So really the program around agroecology, I would say, has grown very organically. We did not launch it as an agroecology program, but it was clearly about ascertaining rights of these workers, so giving them voice, recognition and entitlement. So as women farmers from farm suicide households, what is it that we really want to tell the government, and getting a policy drafted specifically in their name. Similar was the case with the sugarcane workers, where women were completely invisible, as the work is organized around the couple, and the couple also doesn't have an identity, except the identity that goes with the instrument that is used for harvesting sugarcane, which is the koita in Marathi. So really the movement was, or let's say the organizing was around voice, recognition and entitlements. It was really COVID and the pandemic that really brought this opportunity to us, I would say, where a very strong organization building was happening, alliances were getting forged with migrants on the one hand and women who were cultivating or managing livestock or forests on the other, where the pandemic in a way created a food crisis, although it was not a very long-term one, but women who were on farms, cultivating farms, were, we're cultivating farms, but we have no food on our plates. Cotton is not going to give us that, soybean is not going to give us that. So what really are the alternatives? And that's when really what we had been seeding for a long time in terms of why a transition is necessary to even address the distress concerns that you have been talking about, farm suicides, dialogues about it's not just relief and rehabilitation for the woman who's left behind, but what really has caused that crisis, and really should we not be talking about making transitions from chemical intensive, commercialized farming and make a shift. But of course, these were discussions that was, I would say, slowly taking, getting internalized, but it was really the pandemic that helped us launch this program. It's across 6 districts, distress migration, farm suicides, and just a lot of pictures of how the co-learning processes really happened across these 6 districts, where it's more of a deepening of the program, not really scaling up. So we started with just 30 women, with 200 women now signing up to it. Want to continue, but there are multiple challenges, both because of power and also because of various inputs that are required. So let's just come to the last few points that I want to make in terms of what kind of engagements really would be required. So while this program was about challenging the mainstream, getting small marginal women farmers to make that shift, a clear no to chemical and monocropping. And it's hard to say in areas where cotton, soybean and sugarcane really were the crops. And many of you in this room would be familiar with this model. But really, how was the farming experiment unfolding? That is where I think there are lessons for what new areas need to be investigated, how they need to be investigated, and also what kind of actions that should be engaged with. So of course, availability of resources was important. Internalization of the principles of agroecology there was a varied understanding, because they themselves had their own understandings which had to be valued. Unfortunately, a lot of that knowledge had been erased. So how do you really bring back those discussions was also something very important. So there was defiance that we don't agree with this, we modify with very, very well stated rationales. And of course, there were effects on climate, there was crop raiding, but there was also a lot of reorganizing of the work and labor engagement. I think those are areas that need to be investigated. You are talking about a mixed cropping model with multiple diverse crops there. So work also needed to be organized, and there was need for reciprocal labor arrangements as well. But there were also constraints of being a woman farmer, which I hope to share through just 2 or 3 stories. So these are stories of, this is from a farm suicide district where initially there was a lot of resistance from her own family, but also from men in the village who thought, what is this colorful farm that you have introduced? How is it going to really withstand, especially because this is entirely a beauty cotton area. Her husband opposed primarily because it involved a lot of care and nurture work. So there was a different kind of work that was involved in bringing agroecology onto their farms. And so it was cumbersome, there was care and hard work that was needed, and there was resistance continuously from the family to really stop this kind of farming. But today we see a change here, and there are always tensions, but here is Anita's husband and other male mediators who are in fact subscribing to it. Caste and patriarchy, there were multiple examples, Sumi touched upon it, but Pragati is a sugarcane worker and she's a Dalit. She's occupied land as part of the Agrarian movement, and the concerns or the constraints that arise because of being a distressed migrant, a Dalit, a woman, and because of simply the geography, the neglected geography, and her farm being uphill, she does not have timely access to agriculture equipment or the various operations that are required for agriculture. This is already a setback. So how does she really come up in terms of trying to work on this new farm while struggling with the old disadvantages that she anyway had? So there are similar stories, positive, negative, of Anita, Sanjeevani, who for them it was also liberating, because just to give you Sanjeevani's example, as a Dalit woman who was trying out something new and who now in 3 years' time had really a storehouse of local varieties of seed. she had an upper caste woman walk up to her farm and ask her, can you share those seeds with me? I think this is in a way indicative of what is the possibility of a transformative potential. This is not to glorify agroecology as a practice and that it solves all the problems, but I think it holds the potential for collective engagement, which we thought was extremely important. Then just last few points in terms of how we assess transformation, because I think those are the parameters that we're constantly going to require to mobilize when we do our research and do our analysis. So of course knowledge, networking, food, nutrition and happiness. I think these are parameters that are never really there. Knowledge bearers, what kind of knowledge, what kind of modifications are happening really. So in the first picture there is Sattubai, who was really struggling with wild animals and how to ward them off. But later she realized that the droppings of this blue cows actually was helping her in a very different way. She collected those and used that as a bio input. So there are a lot of these innovations which need to be documented. They are really not getting documented, and this can happen only downward up, where empirical work of this kind will teach you on a daily basis what are those innovations and why they are important to really document. So I think this really, and this is a very happy story of how I've managed to really ward off that BT cotton, and today small amounts, but happy that they were able to bring in non-BT cotton onto their farms. And I think again these are measures of transformation, success. Sharing food, being able to just not go empty-handed to her mica, but taking food with her are also important. The local markets are extremely important. Markets were never really the priority for women. Just if you can give me one more minute, Shilpa, I'll point this up. Very innovative. I mean, after consuming, after sharing, women came up with innovative ideas in terms of going to the local grocer store and saying, this is organic and this is, cultivated with hard labor. Why don't you put a slightly higher price to this? And then the grocer agreeing, and so these kind of mechanisms, I think need to be researched, because there's a lot of networking that is happening here, and I think networking is a much underrated, area of research which really needs to be brought in. So transformations are happening at multiple levels. There's diverse food, of course. There are uncultivated vegetables that are seen. Does this really fit into our analysis of the agroecology program? Sharing of produce, I'm sharing. I have some power as a result of that. Challenging caste and patriarchy are given examples. But even for the woman who's left behind after a farm suicide, for her to be recognized as somebody who has something important to share and important knowledge to really share was also, along with the backlashes that they received, was also extremely important. We've also seen women claiming land titles because they were so successful on their 20 gunthas or 20 cents of land that they cultivated here, and now are going ahead and claiming land titles. So I think there's a transformation there which we never really spoke about. But reciprocal labor relations, what I was saying, there is, if you observe farms, there is a lot of exchange of labor, but women are exploiting their labor. It's all underpaid, unpaid labor, and self-exploitation is at the center of that exchange. But here we've seen a new form unfolding where it moves from self-exploitation to care and nurture. I think just the fact that your knowledge, my seed gets exchanged with your seed. This is also exchange. This is also reciprocation of a different kind. New language and new parameters are therefore really very important. So all of this is because why what are these areas for participatory action research, and why do they become necessary? Because in a way we are reintroducing certain knowledge systems which have been systematically erased, reintroducing certain species, cultivation practices. All of this really require assessing of power relations. Who has to be networked with? How do we manage this kind of agriculture with vulnerable and disadvantaged groups? So all of this really needs research. I know there's no time now, but these are broadly the areas that I wanted to flag. Something that is like a dynamic, ongoing process is already what we are doing, what Sumi referred to as ongoing monitoring processes, where women are documenting. And they document not just the biomarkers, but also gender markers in terms of what was the constraint I faced today. Did my neighbor come and steal all my new varieties of seed or the local varieties of seed? This also needs to get documented. And who did I have to network with today so that my produce is kept at the grocers? So these really are important. And finally, when we talk of civic or collective actions for change, I think for us, the organic growth has been extremely important. You don't just launch a program on a farm, but how struggles over identity, voice, recognition, entitlements was very central to making that transition to creating an alternative pathway. So I think that is extremely important, building coalitions and alliances, because we are talking of a political agency that needs to take this forward. So it's not really about how good your farm is, but what is that socio-political agency that will take this program forward has to be identified. And of course, the gendered understanding of the agricultural crisis, but then also how agroecology is not just about an individual farm, but necessarily engages collectives. And without collectives, really, this program will unfortunately remain just one small farm that is probably developed or never developed. But really, the collectivization is its strength. I think that is where we really do. I'm really sorry for excess.
So much, Seema, for this. Lot of food for thought. Narendra is an experienced development professional who has been with Pradhan for more than 3 decades now. He served in many senior positions, senior management positions at Pradhan, including leading the embedded cell with the National Rural Livelihood Mission. It was during his leadership at Pradhan that Pradhan saw a shift in the approach, and after analyzing the organization from a gender perspective and to be a women-centric organization. Naren has been involved in a number of national and international research and documentation efforts to build knowledge from practice. He functions as board members for a few civil society organizations, but takes a lot of interest in fostering NGO networks. And it has been his interest and initiative at National Coalition for Natural Farming to collaborate with Makam to bring in a gender perspective to NCNF's work. Inviting Naren for sharing his experiences and thoughts.
Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Pratyorma Amritam Gamaya. Don't get worried. I'm not going to start a pravachan or something. This is just my attempt at trying to be sound, intelligent, and knowledgeable in such an august audience here. I've done academic work all my life and have done enormous amount of research, and I have evolved concepts and theories to very high level. So I am just a practitioner. So whatever I say will be just a random ramblings of a practitioner and some realizations from our work. So in fact, the mantra which I said, the Pavamana mantra from the Prahada program, Yasatoma Satgamaya, lead kindly from untruth to truth, lead me from darkness to light, lead me from death or mortality to immortality. Because these are eternal transition statements. That's why I actually said it. Because we're talking about transitions, and these are eternal transitions. You always transit from what you don't know to what you know, what you can't see, to more light, and then inaction to action. And I think all our realizations, and in fact yesterday also, Tyagi spoke about Samaj, Seek, or Karna. It's all in the same trend that so a lot of these transitions happen. A lot of it happens inside here. A lot of it happens inside in our heart, and then you actually start acting on it. So everything you act may not be, or everything actually you think and see or hear. All of them you may not realize. All the learning may not have really sink in with yourself, and then the action follows much later. So we are Pradhan as an organization, as a practitioner, is all constantly in a transition stage. So we think something, they say something, and we do maybe much less that as we maybe speak. So we speak a lot, maybe do very little. So here is my experiences about how our thought processes and our actions have changed over a period of time. And Pradhan is a 41-year-old organization, so the learnings also span about 4 decades. And in this set of transitions, in this seminar, we're also talking about 3 levels of transition. We're talking about ecological transitions from unsustainable ways of agriculture to more sustainable ways, more nurturing, more caring, more regenerative ways of doing things, from more destructive and more extractive, exploitative, if you may. We are also talking about, in fact, in the discourse yesterday, we also spoke about how does it make economic and livelihood sense. So we're talking about economic transitions as well. So agriculture, does it make livelihood sense? So whatever we do, does it make sense to the people, the small farmers who are involved in? Why do the small farmers have to be the poorest in the country? Always the bottom of the ladder is always the small farmer, the marginal farmer. So why should we have a system where agriculture, which contributes 15-16% of our GDP, and also employs but a much larger number, 50-60% of the population, but the people are the poorest as well. So how do we make that transition, making agriculture more attractive? And last but not least, how do we make it socially more sustainable? Why do we need to have a practice where 50% of the population does not even know what they are supposed to do? The women who are constantly in the role of just as a family labor, unpaid labor, and all that, both the earlier presenters mentioned. So why do we need to have a system? So how do we make that transition from a gender totally unequal to a more gender equitable, gender equal agriculture? And our own realization in Pradhan also has been, we talk about ecology, economy, and equity. These are actually very strongly intertwined. So it is not that, if you actually understand these interconnections of the 3, it will be much easier to practice it in a way. And so this interconnections are also as important. So it's not, and doing one actually does not need necessarily to the other. You need to be conscious of all the 3 and work on all the 3 aspects. Then you actually get more comprehensive impact. And it took Pradhan 40 years to say today that we work on comprehensive livelihoods. Earlier we used to say we used to livelihoods, we work on rural livelihoods, we work on this, we work on that, or economic empowerment. But today we say we work on comprehensive livelihoods. It's a jargon that we created, one of the keywords, but doesn't need to bother you much. But when we say comprehensive livelihoods, what we mean, we talk about it has to make economic sense. Surely, that is the first thing that we started with. It has to make livelihood sense. So it's not just about agriculture, but agriculture, the whole farming system, livestock, forests, jobs, aspirations, everything is as included in that aspect as together. So does it make economic sense to the farmer? And there are indicators around it, incomes and options, resource productivity. There are so many indicators that we have around it. Second, does it make ecological sense? Does it leave the resources or the that we work with, the soil, the water, more enriched and more regenerated than when we started with? So soil health, the productivity, or safe food, reduced use in chemical fertilizers, and so that's very important part of our set of indicators. So we monitor it like that. So and the third, and last but not the least, and more relevant to this, is does it enhance and advance women's agency and her sense of confidence and her ability to control things around her, income, assets, and space in the family, outside. So this has been a journey we made over a long period of time, and as we said, we are still in the process of understanding this more better and in the process of transition. In this, I think one of the very important realization that we had is, and as we just said, what we do, whatever we do in the village, whether we like it or not, all of us, we intervene in the rural areas as practitioners, and it does impact the rural. Anything we do, we introduce technology, it impacts the women. We introduce regenerative practices, it impacts the women. And unless we are conscious of how it impacts the women, whether it's adversely or in a positive manner, it will most probably and most necessarily impact her adversely. We talk about, technology is, I think, the biggest thing of the day. We all introduce technology, but technology actually excludes women very, very systematically. We talk about mobile-based learning systems, etc. Do you know how much is access of mobile phones to women in the village? So little. So you have mobile-based learning platforms and this, that, and the other, which is supposedly the latest in the set of innovations that we have today. But that excludes women, not completely, but quite a lot. During COVID, we saw that the girl children actually were the most disadvantaged in the villages because they didn't have a mobile phone to attend online classes. The boys still had some, but the girls did not have it all. So therefore, anything that we do, whether we like it or not, impacts the women. So whether you do organic farming or you introduce new technologies. So this is the realization that we actually realized. We knew all this, but kind of internalized it maybe 15, 20 years back when we actually started. Because we've been always working with women all throughout in Pragati. We've been promoting self-help groups and farmer groups and doing agriculture, irrigation for a long time. But then we realized that over a period of time, this is not really helping the woman. She was actually left less better off compared to when we started. We introduced commercial poultry in villages in Hoshangabad. And after some time, when we started looking at these aspects, when we got more sensitized by people like them, we started looking at how is it impacting the woman. We found that the cases in which, one case I can explain, it takes a long time. The woman we had introduced to the, kind of what marginal farming household, predominantly labor, husband, wife, toiling the whole day. We introduced the poultry, and the women started actually earning a lot of money. And then we thought the man would actually reform himself, maybe do all the agriculture work, may actually now has the family as security, enough for him to maybe migrate to something else, get more, stop working. And then he happily went and married again. He actually had two wives. After one wife started earning more, and the other wife would also had a poultry farm. So he was happy. So the women, the birds got domesticated, the man became a free bird. So So, in a sense, it had an adverse impact. You talked about the cotton farmer, and so all the changes that we made, there is also a journey the woman makes when that transition happens. I'm very happy to talk with you. Very happy to talk to that woman and see what is the journey that she made. There's a case my colleague was narrating from Mandla, Madhya Pradesh, where they introduced SRI. All of us worked on SRI extensively. And SRI, the first 15 days is highly uncertain. You don't even know what is happening on the ground because you only have one seedling and the seedlings are so small. First 15-20 days, you can't even see what is happening. And in fact, the woman shared, and she didn't share it in the agriculture training program. In agriculture training program, they share, what great productivity I had in my SRI, etc., etc. But in the gender training program, she shared, Didi, that first 15 days was hell for me. Because she had actually fought with her husband. Husband was, you can imagine, as you should, one of the drunkards, generally violent. And she had fought to get that plot to do SRI. I said, I learned something new, I want to experiment. Nobody was with her. She said 15 days, nobody talked to me, nobody came to the field with me. Every day they will be taunting me. There is a more palatable of the lot, but there will be much more abuses, beating. तुमने अपना जमीन को बर्बाद कर दिया तो वहाँ काम नहीं कर दिया whatever. So she had to double struggle. It was only after 15 days when the dealers actually started coming that she said, otherwise she had packed her bag. She said, 15 दिन में हमसे इतना झेलना पड़ा कि मैं तो अपना बोरिया बिस्तर बांध दिया था कि if it doesn't work, खुदा न खास्ते that proper trade, she would have actually had to leave the house just because she dared to do something different. So the journey for a very woman farmer is difficult, especially in the change. So as an intervener, do I need to know it or not? So that is more important. So do I understand her journey and am I with her in that journey? So then that made us more conscious. So then we started having more groups, more discussions, more inclusive discussions with the men, etc. Saying that this is not just her struggle, it's all of us. We are trying to do something new in the village. So why should it just be the woman's struggle? So how do we? So I think so on and so forth. So I think we have to really work with the women on. So this journey is not just made by the woman. The woman has to make a journey that she needs to be able to assert this fight with, not fight necessarily, assert the space, get the 20 decimals of land, do that agriculture. But that itself does not actually make the story complete. We have to be with her in her journey of making that journey, making that, and as a collective, not just one woman farmer. The women farmers group as a collective, how do we actually systematically handhold them to make this journey? So if you look at the woman farmer, the inequalities and exclusions are far too many. So you have to actually address each of them. There is financial exclusion, there is mobility exclusion, there is market exclusion, there is skills, knowledge, capabilities, all are excluded. So there is an inequity in each aspect of agriculture or any economic activity or any, let's say, social existence that she makes. So if we have to make contribution at each of that, so in fact all our training programs is not just about done. Give me a couple of moments. So this I think I'll maybe cut short this part of it. So all our intervention is not just about training on agriculture, but it's also about women, taking on many different roles in the realm of agriculture, as agriculture trainers, as extension workers, as farmer producer organization leaders, as governing board members, or market aggregators, agriculture entrepreneurs. So everywhere we need to see women, not just in the traditional gender decided role, but in the multifarious different kinds of roles is what I think we're trying to do constantly. But I think the most important aspect of what I wanted to say, which is to do it very quickly, is that to do all this, the more important thing that we realized, again, maybe once we did a lot of work with the women's groups out there, we said unless the things out there that we say will not really be effective and be effectively implemented unless we reform in here. The last slide which Dr. Meenesh Shah also made. The institution, the intervener, Pradhan as an organization, how sensitive are we internally to our women colleagues? That we will be able to, our women colleagues and men colleagues will be sensitive to the women out there, to understand their stories. We need to understand stories here. So I think we went through a journey of 10 years, which Shilpa was saying in her journey. We had a gender transformation. In a sense, more gender sensitized journey, I guess. It is still a journey, it's still in transition. But we're doing a lot of things systematically to ensure that the men and the women in the organization are far more sensitive towards each other, the men especially towards the women. We all come from middle class backgrounds, from rural, urban, small town villages. We all come with our own cultural baggages and whatever we learn. We need to unpack quite a lot of that and actually become far more sensitive to women in my team. Many places there's only one woman colleague in a team of 5 or 6 men. I mean, they can be so overpowering and so bullying in a sense that the woman becomes very difficult for that colleague to and sustain in a place which may be far away in Jharkhand, in some block town. So there, how do the organization deal with each of the women colleagues? How do the team of 5 or 4 or 5 men around her be sensitive to her needs? So that I think is a very important, and we have made a long journey. So we even have a gender action plan today in Pragati, where we're looking at how, at the level of sensitivity, at the level of action, at the level of addressing grievances, concerns. So we're trying to track all that. Then we have some system we implemented. So we're trying to institutionalize something called a gender audit, where we have trained gender auditors inside Pragati who understand, been trained specially by experts on these dynamics of how women colleagues and how to work these dynamics. And they go to every location. We got 70 field locations. So go to every field location, talking to the people there for 3 days, documenting, questionnaire. So there are a lot of things that they do. We call it proper gender audit. Basically a process audit of how, and there's also special training for the youngsters of gender sensitivity. We have something called a women caucus, where all the women colleagues get to sit and talk to each other at the regional level, so that when there are things that they're not able to speak out to other men colleagues or in the larger organizational forums, they have smaller forums where they can come up with. And there are these leaders. We are also, last 2 months. So we are also looking at tracking the data of how many women, because some externally what we look at is, do we have enough women in your governing board, in your leadership, in your management, important management nodes, in your thematic groups, any leadership positions in the organization. We are now consciously trying to track, are women moving into those roles, or they're only on just executive roles itself. Plus our own recruitment policies we have utilized quite a lot. Now at our entry level we have about 60% women. But surely the transition inside the organization is one more difficult. As you move up in the ladder, you will find, or move further in the ladder, you might find much lesser proportions. But we are conscious of these numbers and we're trying to accurate. So these are the things. So I said the work out there as well as the work in here, both are important. So the work and the worker both have to be equally sensitive especially if we're talking about the inclusion of women in our endeavors. Thank you so much. I have some more things to say. I will take time. Thank you.
Sure. Lot of good thoughts for a lot of civil society organizations here. How do we change mindset, and not just in superficial ways? So we have Padmasri awardee Sabarmati. Thank you Sabarmati. First, I just want to thank. She's traveled all her night here and reached at 8. She started late at night, and thank you so much for coming all the way. Padmasri awardee Sabarmati is an Odisha-based environmentalist, organic farmer, and an activist. She and her father, Professor Radha Mohan, received the Padmasri Award in 2020 in recognition of their more than 30 years of hard work, immense contribution in organic farming, and converting 90 acres of wasteland into a dense forest, which is now home for more than 1,000 species of plants, 500 varieties of rice, 800 varieties of indigenous seeds for seed bank, and of course home of numerous animals and birds. Padmasri Sabarmati is also a recipient for the Nari Shakti Puraskar received from the President of India on International Women's Day in 2017. And that was for her amazing efforts to train women farmers and work on gender issues. Very happy to have you here and share your
Just coming to Gujarat. So Sambhu and Kavita dragged me from east to west to come to Gujarat. It was unresistible. I came on 2 conditions. Don't ask me to write a draft, and don't ask me to present a PPT. That was the condition I came with, and they are kind enough to agree to that. So I'll be just sharing my experiences regarding seeds, seed as a part of the agroecological activities we are thinking of, or agroecological practices in agriculture we are thinking of. So maybe if we think about gender issues, we have to think about sisterhood alliance for seeds for survival. There is no other way. Besides women's contribution in agriculture, they played an immensely great role in conserving seeds despite wars, drought, famine, floods, cyclones, epidemics, fire, accidents, many challenges over millennia. So seed is one of the, besides other natural resources, other capital, seed is one of the most important capital, though we think about integrated activities, but look at the whole agroecological issue from a holistic point of view. But here I am trying to focus on seed. I'll include 2 things. While working for seed conservation, I also experienced certain things, and while being part of the seed conservation activities by others and getting involved in the capacity building programs for others, I came across few things which I would like to share. If you are thinking about gender issues, any aspects, you take any aspects. So you have to think about 3 things. Seeing the unseen. Often we don't see their contribution, their roles, so we just forget that. And reporting the unreported. And third is addressing the unaddressed. If we focus on these 3 things, we will be getting our own answers. Women have been playing an important role in conservation of seeds till Green Revolution was introduced in a very big way. And then their role became very marginalized after men started going out to buy the new seeds, new modern seeds, improved seeds, high-yielding seeds, hybrid seeds, which they were buying from the government offices, block office like block agriculture office, or companies, shops like that. So women are out of the business, particularly in staple food, rice, wheat, and other things. Same thing happened in case of vegetables also, though it came little later. You go to many villages now, you don't see a single indigenous variety of vegetables vegetable seeds available in the village. It's such pathetic situation. Even rice varieties are also totally wiped out. So when things are purchased from market, women are generally out in the system. It's very obvious. Sometimes they don't have money, sometimes they don't go to market, and they don't deal with purchased inputs. So chemical farming also brought a gender disparity, inequality in seed systems. So if we think about seed related activities, I see 6 dimensions. One is conservation of biocultural heritage, which are mostly purchased by women, and then research activities are there, ecosystem maintenance, livelihood, climate challenges, and nutrition related issues. These 6 pillars are there, and these are all interrelated, intertwined, interwoven. We don't see them in silos, in isolation. So the whole issue of agroecological perspective, when we think, seed as the main issue here, I say that if we don't save the biodiversity, we perish. There is no other alternative, no other option left. Either you save or you perish. So if we have to save ourselves, we have to save the biodiversity, and then women need to play a very important role. This is the very simple logic. And the kind of challenges they are facing, they are quite different, like human related challenges and natural challenges. Human related challenges are like capacity building is required because they are de-skilled Vasavis. They are very much, is very interested in this topic, and they are totally de-skilled. How to grow, how to use indigenous varieties, vegetable varieties, staple crops, like that. They have forgotten those things because they are not using the seeds anymore. So it's very essential to rebuild their capacity in 2 things. One is management of their seed banks, because seed banks are coming up in many areas. Many institutions are promoting this, and some individuals are also promoting this. So one is technical aspect, how to use the seed, how to preserve the seed, how to select the seed. All these aspects are related to the technical aspects, and the other one is managerial issues, how to manage your seed bank. It's not just, sometimes it's very nice to see pictures, where rice is hanged, maize is hanged, many other crops are kept in beautiful plastic bottles, but people say that, like rats have eaten away, then the insects have destroyed. What do we do about that? Our institutions, our organization told us to decorate it. So sometimes we end up doing all these things, so we need managerial skills as well. Then policy issues are also there. There are many laws, new rules are coming up, are also there in existence related to seeds. How do they deal with that? Do they have to register their seeds under PPVFRA compulsorily or not? How do they market that? Do they have to do some license? Do they have to have some license? All these issues are there related to the policies. In Odisha, there are some experiments done by the government also. Recently, 4 indigenous ragi varieties were included in the mainstream seed system. It's again due to the effort of the civil society organizations, including WASAN, and many other farmers did participate in that. So how do we really recognize a wide range of seeds, many varieties of seeds? It's not just focusing 4 or 5 types of seeds bringing to the mainstream seed system. So the other thing is, what happened to the landless women? How they are integrated in the whole seed related activities? That's one question. Can they, like processing, marketing, these are some other avenues, can we include them? Then how can we have a seed bank model which can be operated on a sustainable basis? Because if the organization is giving us money, the organization is receiving money from some donors, and we do the seed bank for some time, after the funding stops, how can we continue? So this is one challenge many seed banks are facing. And you'll be very happy to know that many women are involved in this kind of seed banks in Odisha. I cannot tell about other states, but many are involved in creating and managing seed banks at the community level. So the maintenance of the seed banks on a sustainable basis is one challenge. And the other thing is, how long can they save their seeds and how many varieties can they save in a very economic way? If we don't do it in an economic way, then maybe after some times people get burnt out, the interest is lost, and then they lose the seeds also. So how do they manage to, how do they continue with that? Then the decision to set the which varieties need to be saved and which varieties they can discard, this is a very critical decision they have to take. Sometimes very few individuals take decision like, okay, I want to say 400 varieties of rice, I take pride in that. But after sometimes it becomes a burden with the job of conservation. Then there is no incentive for them. If the seeds are kept in government gene banks, a lot of people get paid for that. A lot of facilities are created, infrastructure is created, scientists, managers, many people are there to get paid. But no one pays the women or men also who have been conserving seeds with their own efforts. So sometimes low literacy level also, they find it very difficult when they have very low literacy level, how to label them properly, how to keep them properly, how to sell it properly. For all these things, they have to depend on others. Coming to the natural nature-related challenges, weather uncertainties, which we are calling climate-related challenges, are becoming more and more, which is really posing, which is making our life difficult, to conserve the seeds. Personally, I conserved 300 varieties of pigeon pea. In one cyclone, 295 were totally lost. I could not recover that at all. Next year, another 4 were lost. So similar things happen in many areas. People are losing a lot of varieties because of the climate uncertainties. Certain things don't germinate, don't produce proper grains or fruits or seeds like that. And wildlife related challenges is also a big challenge which particularly women are facing. Why I am saying again and again women are facing, because our agriculture is graying and getting more feminized. Agriculture is left to them, more older people and more women. So that's why I am telling again and again that they are facing more problems. And degeneration of natural ecological endowments is another issue. If we don't have the forest, you don't get the tubers from the forest. If you don't have the swampy area, you don't get certain varieties of leafy vegetables from the swampy area. So this is one aspect which we generally tend not to look at, but the degeneration of ecological endowments is creating challenges in this. And then people are asking, if we have to conserve indigenous varieties, should we follow only organic method or natural farming method? So there is also a confusion. So there is a lot of work need to be done. Fortunately, in last 2 decades, many people have been working hard for seed conservation, which you can see in annual seed fairs, food fairs, and then mapping of forgotten foods, biodiversity, all these things. But these things need to be, consolidated and come under one umbrella so that we can have more power. So thank you so much. I know that my time is over now. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
women get the same, whatever they get in terms of food, in terms of time, same amount as what the men get, and they have the same rights and everything. Even women can become leaders who are actually calling all the community people to join in the shifting cultivation operations. So that way it's very much equitable in terms as compared to other systems. But unfortunately, this is not recognized even in the very great states where a lot of programs on millets are going on. They are not receiving any acknowledgement, any recognition for this system. In fact, we are promoting so-called non-agroecological things, which are also probably much important, but we are neglecting this aspect. And this type of farming, this type of livelihood is considered detrimental to agroecology, which is not. So we need to look at it in a very different way, and I think here the gender equity is much better.
In this group, I mean, very pertinent points. Thank you so much. Very critical analysis of how gender is differentiated in depending on how educated you are, how wealthy you are, where you come from. But my question to the group here is, what is our space for civic action for policy engagement? You know, the Department of Agriculture, the government works in silos. There's a Department of Agriculture which is divorced from nutrition. At most, what we do is we try to converge the programs from Women's and Child's Department with agricultural ethical. So I would like researchers to really give us those location-specific, detailed ideas of gender, of how we should. When we think of, we're on the verge of a collective movement here, whether you call it natural farming or agroecology or organic farming. Yeah, thank you.
It was really eye-opening for me. My name is Venki Ramchandran and I work with development organizations. One statement from Seema, the slide really struck me was, you talked about self-exploitation to a reciprocation. Maybe as a process kind of a question is in terms of, do you sort of do, when you're working with women, marginalized women there, how do you sort of engage in making them see this self-exploitation as a process? Maybe if you could delve a little deeper on that, it would be helpful.
Based organization is the one where women play traditionally an important role. There's also market coordinates this and state also coordinates. All these coordinations are, moving parallel rather than interacting. I do not know what kind of competitions that this community-based seed mobilizations and organizing practices faces from the other domains, and how you compete to these domains. Do you also see any future for this community-based coordination mechanisms in a rapidly changing transition world? Especially, I'm worried, especially because I'm interested in developing seed banks for the coastal agriculture, and it is in a very bad shape. The seed economy needs to be stabilized. For instance, the whole western bank, western coastal side, we have the Ghazni banks, and also the eastern side, the upper side of the West Bengal, Orissa also. This is a very crucial issue. Where is the seed? There's no seed. We are talking about the transition. Seed banks really play an important role. Nobody works, and we really do not bother. And we criticize farmers by saying that you are not doing this, you are keeping it fallow. Where is the seed? There is nothing. So this is
ecological practices kind of end up increasing the labor burden of women, and you also alluded to that. So, for example, bio-input preparation is considered a woman's task. So, do you have any kind of examples where agroecology has been implemented without increasing the labor burden, or that labor burden has been shared with men as well? I know, Seema, you refer to men being involved, but do they also share the labor burden with women?
It's in the decade back. I wanted to look at it from the lens of Karl Marx. He said two things: factors of production and relations of production. Right? Now let's look at it from that. From my understanding of where I work, the relations of production had two important features. One was that Ada Pantalu was one thing that was bad. production that Karl Marx told, or relation to production. Now come to the factors of production. The factors of production have two dimensions. In those days, I was told by the women, they had a system of Ola, right? Where the dowry would be paid to the woman in the dryland areas of the Deccan Plateau. Not very long, about 100 years back, right? It reversed because agriculture changed. Why did agriculture change in the Deccan Plateau? The First World War drove the British to ask for cash. Until then, the Nizam was collecting jawar as his tax. That changed and the whole world changed. Why I'm saying this whole long thing is, please look at it from that lens and please understand that tipping points and turning points of history is a good direction to look for the transitions of the future.
Spoke about when we, so one thing is when we are bringing in transitions, or even when we say that we are empowering women, are we, I mean, this is just a reflection and a question, that are we actually making them work more? Because as I think Naren said that, you know, men, or somebody else said that men have to take up spaces if women are doing something else, or if women are, I think you said so. So one is this, that when you transition to a different kind of thing, or you are empowering women, are we increasing their drudgery? Because, and if those spaces, because see, men are not expected to be at both places, whereas women would still be like, okay, let me quote an example from FPOs because I am familiar with that thing more. So you are supposed to be a BOD also, but आपको घर पे जो है चूल्हा भी करना होगा. Men will not do that. Men can choose whether to be a BOD or to do the chulha, but she has to do both. So how do we plan interventions such that such things are taken care of? And the other thing is that, again, from the FPO perspective, when we, so you know, it's not that there is something in the policy you need to have one BOD, or you need, even without, even outside FPO thing, okay, the women leader has to be there, so rakh diya la karke. Are we actually looking at that, you know, does she have the time, does she have the choice of being a leader, not being a leader, choosing chula over BOD role, or choosing BOD over chula role, or whatever? So how do we design interventions that these things are taken care of?
Educate the men.
Right. Increasingly, the recognition of women's role and the attention given to their identity, their contribution, and to their new kind of endowment has meant that more and more there is an increasing burden on them to play out this role of agency in practice, which is very well flagged by Sumi. So in that context, is it not time for us to look at all this in a context where men also become partners and we no longer put this excessive emphasis on women? I'd like to put it forward.
Big thank you to the panel for raising so many very, very important issues. And as a co-organizer, I want to also recognize the women who have been feeding us the last few days, and enabling us to have these kinds of discussions.
Uba thasho beno.
People are already doing it because we are talking about gender activity, and not, I think we take it quite a routine exercise in terms of considering just as farmers. We think that farmers are a uniform entity. Similarly, women also, we need to do a more disaggregated, I would say, kind of an analysis. Like when we were introducing agroecology in the villages, then even within a family, there were differences of women of different age groups. The elderly women were more reluctant as compared to the younger women. The role of different age groups within the same family for the various livelihood activities also differ. So I just wanted to raise this issue, and let's be very careful about it.
No, please.
Question on
Can you tap it to see whether it's working? Just tap it.
It's on and off. It's working. It's working. Okay. I think I can be heard anyway, but although I'm 76 years old, my voice will carry to the end. The question about shifting cultivation you're right that in areas where shifting cultivation, where tribal areas where shifting cultivation exists, in central India, very little now, or more extensively in northeastern India, it is true that there is more egalitarianism in the field, in the sphere of work. However, and women may be leaders, women may be, there are some, even over there are some activities that they don't do. They don't do the slashing, for instance, because there are some constraints. However, in the domestic and the social sphere, they also suffer from many forms of patriarchal exploitation. In Mizoram, one woman told me that they have the right to work but not to earn. So, you know, one should, it's true that relative to other areas it is somewhat better, but it doesn't mean that it is any kind of ideal. There are forms of patriarchy even in shifting cultivation tribal areas. I had mentioned in the very first, in my first slide, that one of the normative principles is to recognize that women are not a homogeneous group. They have to distinguish between, it depends on what work they do. Their knowledge comes from what work they do. And age is a very important factor. We are seeing, for the last 15 years or so, we've seen in the Northeast where farming responsibilities have actually shifted to older women. Younger women, they are also not farming wherever they are getting educated. So age is a very important factor. About policy action, that is a very important question for which there really is no answer. At one time, 50 years ago, forests were part of the agriculture ministry. In fact, in that Indian farming issue, 1975, they had forests, they had livestock, they had, you know, all these issues were covered. But it was civic action and people like us who got forests out of the agriculture department. Now we realize that maybe that was not a good thing. But this can only happen through civic action. It cannot happen, researchers can't point the way. We have to walk the path to find it.
You are worried where are the seeds, and that is why we have started working on seeds. जहाँ नहीं होता है तहाँ वहाँ होना चाहिए. If the resource is not there, we have to start collecting the resources. So first thing is we need to talk about it. Why do we need all these indigenous seeds? So the farmers, whether men or women, unless they understand the importance of this, they will not bother to conserve protect or use the indigenous varieties. So somebody has to start the action somewhere. So individual conservation is one way of doing it, and in a centralized way. And the other way is like decentralized way, which we promote generally, adopt a seed. One farmer, one variety. If we are working with 500 farmers, 100 farmers out of the 500 farmers agree to adopt the seed like we adopt the babies, then 100 varieties will be conserved in their land. It doesn't have to be in a big scale, but slowly we can start like this. And many other activities like biodiversity competition among women, among children, we can start like that. So slowly we can see what are the things left in our area, and we can also start sourcing them from the nearby areas having similar agroecology. We can start working on this, but if we say that no, it cannot be done, then the door is closed. And interestingly, in the last 2 decades, many people have started doing this all over the country. It's not only in the country, globally it has started. So many varieties which were thought to be vanished completely from the scene, they are now brought back, people started cultivating and sharing the seed. So seed bank is one of the methods, but through which the interest is big. And then the seed melas, food melas, they are all organized in many different states, in different ways. Yeah, we can start thinking about it at least. Then only we can connect.
Civic, you want to say? I don't have any Pakka answer to any of this. Just one question I would like to address to is are we adding to the drudgery and are we adding to the the problems of women by introducing new ways of agriculture, etc. And I think that is some of these problems cannot be. I mean that there is truly that is the situation. In fact, does add to her drudgery, does add towards the number of activities in terms of agriculture. The more we bring agriculture more and more into the purview of the woman's ambit, training or extension, market aggregator, running FPOs. Now, when it comes to regenerative agriculture, lots of decisions. So more things are coming to the woman's ambit, but to that commensurately are her other responsibilities getting shared by the man, which I don't think is happening at that scale or at that level, at that speed. So in fact, I was talking to my colleagues, they said these two areas where we still haven't been able to make a lot of headway. There's a lot of recognition, a lot of influence for the woman, etc. But two very key areas where they're not been able to make big dent is one in the sharing of the care work in the household, children, mending to the house, tending to the house, washing, those kinds of basic household work. That sharing is still really not happening very well. It's always expected the woman has to do it, so she has to show up in the farm, but she has to cook and everything before she goes. Most of the cases, there are lots of good examples also now where the men are sharing. The second is in property right. If you in Haryana or in a tribal area in Madhya Pradesh, etc., if the woman is going to raise the question of, part of the land in my name, is going to lead to a lot of violence and a lot of problems. So this is again. So I think some of these are intergenerational. How do this generation now bring up the next the next generation children? How are they being brought up by the parents of this generation? I think a lot of will depend on how that happens as well. So we invest a lot in the current set of farmers, the women farmers, and we are trying to bring a lot of youth into the program through entrepreneurship and a lot of this work which I described, the additional new opportunities that arise in. We are getting a lot of girls and boys to get involved in it, and the trainings that we provide on gender, on work sharing, etc., is to both the boys and the girls and to the men in the village. So over a period of time, I think things could change. So if you look at work sharing, how much does it happen in urban households? So forget rural households, our own households, how much do men share in terms of care work or the traditional gender stereotype work? So it is a process of change. I think we are still in transition.
So very quickly, because I think we are supposed to wrap up. Just two questions that were very specific. One was on self-exploitation. I think there's a lot of work done by feminist economists around this. So yes, definitely we do engage in that kind of conversation. In fact, those are also the kind of the documentation that women themselves are doing in terms of where all are they saving on expenditure. In a sense, that is exploitative work. And mapping for the existing dominant crops, whether it's soybean, sugarcane, or cotton. In our area, they are the most important crops. Really, how is women's work panning out? So that self-exploitation is something where we consciously ask them to document, map out, and also try and now increasingly asking them to document in the agroecology work that they're doing, what is the nature of that work. And yes, there is a burden, but how do we now look at this new work? But also, as I mentioned, there are reciprocal labor arrangements in different parts of Maharashtra. It's called different, but there is these kind of labor arrangements always existed. But what we are seeing now in this kind of a monocropping kind of agriculture, here the kind of work that women engage in, because there's also distress migration and men are migrating out, we're clearly seeing women engaged in spraying of pesticides and on each other's farms. So, you see that the exploitation is not just in terms of more work, but also more hazardous work that we are seeing women do. So I think this documentation is very critical for even moving forward. How do we then analyze our situation? And that analysis has to happen collectively. It is not me going and documenting, as Sumi said, It's a revelation. Now all our outputs are really through your lens. You see, you analyze, and you decide, do you want to be in this or do we want to change? So that process is very much very central to our work. On type of agroecology, I'm going to share this report. It has the details of how we arrived at what we arrived, and again, it's not a model, it's not a blueprint, and we're working with Chetna Vikas with out of Varna, years of experience, along with the work that we've been doing, but clearly it is a mix of varieties, various varieties, local varieties, which because of Chetna Vikas's work, there's a good farmer network through which we're able to source some of the local improved seed varieties. But the synergies are extremely critical. So as you know, we always say, this is like an insurance, it's a shock. You have, your moon may fail, but at least your urad will be there to help you. So different times of sowing and harvesting, which also increase the work for women, but also provide as a shock, as a shock absorber. So those are the different varieties, and how we mix them, how we look at, multiple things are actually documented. But clearly what is right now missing in our link is also because of not being able to engage with multiple policy, for example, the livestock component. So it's always sourcing it from outside. So we're struggling with farmyard manure or backyard poultries and all of that. But those are things that we certainly want to integrate. I don't know if that was your question really. And the second is about the burden, work burden. I think, yes, that we see leadership potential because, as we've all recognized that they are bearers of knowledge because of the kind of work they're doing, not glorifying them or essentializing. But why can't they then be in leadership positions where conversations with men have to happen? It is not to say that women lead as in you do everything. But I think it's more of, we know some answers, and can we all start talking together? So that's why I spoke about the transition where we are also engaging with the men of the household or in the community to really start talking about this as a collective effort. And again here, I think I just want to, just one more point that I wanted to make about the work burden, and I think somebody spoke about empowering women. I think we really are nobodies to empower women, but I think that process has to happen through collective processes. And here I would really draw on feminist understanding where we are really talking of, those conversations have stopped happening. Division of work, division of labor. These were conversations that were so central to discussions within the feminist movement. They still are, but they need to be extended into areas where it's not a question of he can be here and he chooses not to be there. I think the point is a reimagining of women's work. She has to be there and here, he has to be there and here. So I think it's really talking about how work burdens are shared and work doesn't become burden. I think we're also talking of that feminist vision where how you conceptualize work in a monocropping, dominant agrarian paradigm. Yes, work is a burden. But we are talking of a different kind of an economy, a care nurture economy, where sharing is the key principle. I think drawing on Amitabh Ghosh's recent book, he really talks of a politics of vitality, and I think that is really so important to bring into our work, where care and nurture become very, very central. And just the last point on Karl Marx, but yes, we need to draw on Marx, we need to go further, draw on Rosa Luxemburg, Ambedkar, Phule, and I think we're drawing on all of that understanding to really disaggregate women, look at different categories of women. But yes, thanks for reminding that class is very central to analysis. So.
Thank you so very much, everyone, for this very lively, vibrant session with a lot of, as I kept on repeatedly saying, food for thought. A lot of questions for research, for civic action, which we need to reflect on when we are talking about agroecology and sustainable transitions in agriculture from a gender perspective. So I think साबरमती ने बहुत संक्षिप्त में जो कहा, that is I think seeing the unseen, reporting the unreported and addressing the unaddressed. That sort of summarizes it all, which all the other three speakers also said it in different ways. And just to sort of flag some of the issues, but not perhaps giving justice to all that they have focused upon. But if we sort of, some of the questions that came across, how does a gender inclusive approach to agroecology result in meeting different gender needs? And what are the different gendered outcomes that we are talking about? I think both, all of them, in fact, all three of them, I'll talk about that later, but talk about different types of gendered outcomes and indicators that we need to sort of think about beyond just farms and income. We also talked about, Naren talked about the organizational processes and how do we capture those. So it's not just a program which has been, or an approach which is sort of gendered, but how does it link with the organization's mindset? So what are those processes, procedures, practices which are leading towards this change at the field level, and how do we reflect on that? So a documentation on that, and of course coalitions working together for this. So good practices, coalitions on these aspects is very, very important. And the last but not the least is again documentation of how do we get into this area of change of mindset of the community in general, men in particular, for sharing labor, for sharing, I mean, Seema has put it very, very clearly and sharply, so I will not narrate this, but that's an area which we really need to work together on, and especially when we look at agroecology, and the way she defined labor, the burden, the work burden versus the care and nurture. So our own thinking needs to be changed and looked at it from a different angle. Thank you so much for being here and So there is a the experience of Makam Maharashtra has been documented, and they just I think got this. The Raskum people could not wait for long. Conversation. That's why I was hurrying a bit. But yes, this is
actually a summary report of much of what I spoke, and it's a summary, it's not a very analytical report, but I just thought that this was a good occasion to really just share what we are doing at a very, very small scale in Maharashtra with Makam partners. So
hold it like professionals.
Very engaging session. We are half an hour late now. The next session will be in two places. So I request that we start not later than 11:20.